Are you sleeping on craft whiskey? My advice is, don't. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Hutch, and thanks so much for joining me on this journey through the world of whiskey. So today we are talking about a topic that, admittedly, it took me a little while to see the value of in my own whiskey journey. And so I really wanted to talk about it and sort of discuss what was on my mind and share that with you guys. And that is the value of craft whiskey. So let's just start by talking about what craft whiskey is. Now that is a little bit hard to do actually because there's no set or agreed upon definition for what actually makes up a craft distillery. But there are some guidelines. Some people have tried to put down certain rules, and just to give you a sense of what they are, I'm going to cite what the American Craft Spirits Association says. So they say that a craft distillery is any distillery that produces under 750,000 gallons per year, a distillery that values transparency in their ingredients and what goes on their bottle, and last but not least, they're independently owned and operated. So those are three general ideas around what goes into craft whiskey. Now, not everybody agrees on that. Some people say it should be 10,000 barrels or less. Some say it should be 100,000 gallons or less. It's up for debate. But when you think about craft whiskey, what you really should think is a smaller, younger distillery that's really trying to make interesting whiskey. So when I first got into the world of bourbon and the world of whiskey, I myself was a bit hesitant to get into the world of craft whiskey. Really, that's for two major reasons. First is that craft whiskey is often a little more hit or miss than the larger brand name distilleries. You might get a product and really love it and think it's great. You might get a product and it's just a little young and off the wall, and that can happen. And then second, craft whiskey is often more expensive than the larger distilleries, just by virtue of the fact that they cannot create as much whiskey as quickly and sell it in bulk. And that just means they have to price their whiskeys up a little bit in order to make a profit, which I can understand. But for sure, those two things were sort of holding me back for a while from getting into the world of craft whiskey. But eventually, there came a time where I felt like I just had to. I had to dip my toes into the pool of craft whiskey to see what it had to offer. And I am really honestly so glad that I did. That's because as I've explored it just a little bit, it's already been such an interesting experience, and it's been a perspective expanding and palate expanding experience, which is sort of what this is all about, right? So today I just wanted to highlight a few of the craft whiskey bottles that I have just for their sheer awesomeness, give craft whiskey a little bit of a spotlight for the day, and just let you guys know that it's certainly worth a little bit extra risk and maybe a little bit extra money to go out and try to find some really good craft whiskey. So let's walk through what we've got here a little bit. Over here we've got something I've highlighted on the channel multiple times, Redwood Empire Lost Monarch. California distillery, who knew California can make some really, really good whiskey. And this Boo Rye is knock your socks off good. Such a good blend of bourbon and rye, and that makes it just so interesting and unique. And that's sort of one of the major highlights of all craft whiskey is it's going to be more unique for sure. And then we've got another one of my favorites, Chattanooga Whiskey 111 cask strength. This is from Chattanooga Distillery down in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It's only a 2-year-old whiskey. Another feature that often you'll see with craft whiskey is that it's young. As these distilleries sort of grow up and develop, they produce younger whiskeys. And this stuff does not taste like it's 2 years old at all. I mean, it is so, so good. And I am so excited to see what comes from Chattanooga Whiskey next because I've tried this, which is a great, great thing. Then over here, we've got Peerless Bourbon. I've just got a little sampler of this that somebody gave me. 107 proof, really delicious sort of traditional bourbon notes on that one. Rich in flavor and caramel and some good spiciness. I have not actually gone out and bought a bottle of Peerless anything yet, but from the taste of this thing, I'm definitely going to be keeping my eye out. I've heard their double oaked product is really phenomenal, so definitely on the lookout for that. But Peerless, they do something right for sure, because that little sample is really, really good. Last but not least, we've got New Riff single barrel here, the bourbon. Really delightful bottle, just a store pick from a store right down the street from me that does a really good job. New Riff, I actually live pretty close to New Riff, so this will be my highlighting the fact that craft whiskey can also be a local experience. So you can go out to your local craft distillery, grab a bottle, try it, support a small business, support the little guy, and often you can get some really, really good whiskey out of it. In fact, that's what I've got poured up here in my glass. Just wanted to taste it a little bit, see what New Riff single barrel here, what we're tasting today and what it has to offer. And again, just put the spotlight on some really good craft whiskey. So let's get into the nose and palate. Oh man, such an interesting nose. Again, that word interesting comes up. That's sort of the theme of craft whiskey. If not anything, it's gonna be interesting. Sort of like berries, like on this I get like a berry note, like blackberry, some mint or herbalness to it, which is really surprising for a bourbon. And then some good deeper caramels and vanillas. Maybe something a little metallic on there. Everything New Riff does is bottled in bond, so this is at least 4 years old. But maybe a slight younger smell to it a little bit. Let's taste it. Cheers. Yeah, such a delightful whiskey for sure. That blackberry note is really prominent on the palate, at least for this, single barrel store pick. Really, really interesting. Sort of like berries and cream, but with blackberries. And then there's some really good baking spices and cinnamon and caramel and vanilla. And that blackberry and vanilla note just kind of lingers for a while with a good finish. So really, really good bottle here, 104 proof. And just something you're never gonna see again. I mean, a single barrel product from a craft distillery, certainly worth checking out. So overall, if you haven't necessarily dived into the world of craft whiskey yet, or if you have and you know some of this, you'll know that what you really get out of that experience is that you get to taste some younger whiskey from a growing distillery and watch them develop, which is such a cool experience. I'm especially excited about like Chattanooga Whiskey, seeing them in 10 years, what they're producing. It's gonna be so cool saying I tasted some stuff from the early days, which is great. Then of course you also get to support a smaller business and be part of their growth, which is so cool. And last but not least, certainly not least, is that you get to experience new flavors. You get to experience something interesting, and maybe it is a bit off the wall, but at least that expands your palate and is unlike anything you've ever had before. And isn't that kind of the purpose of getting into the bourbon and whiskey world? It's to try new things and share them with people and develop your palate and find a new note that you've never had before. And maybe it's not your favorite, but at least it is something creative and has some energy behind it and is new and fresh. And I think that's what craft whiskey sort of offers to you and to the bourbon world. It's sort of the cutting edge of the bourbon world in a lot of ways. And that's really exciting. So thanks for bearing with me today. I know it's not really been a typical episode. It's more like a PSA from me about what I see as the value of craft whiskey and me sort of cheerleading craft whiskey as they try to do something new and fresh and interesting. What I'd really love to hear from you is what's your favorite craft whiskey bottle that you've had? Put that in the comments below. Let's start a little discussion about what's really great craft whiskey that maybe people haven't heard of before. If you like craft whiskey, want to support craft whiskey too, please smash that like button on the video. If you're enjoying the content from the entire channel, please hit the subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow and helps me to figure out what kind of content to create for you guys. I think that about wraps it up here today for all things craft whiskey. Until I see you guys again for another video, all I can say is keep drinking good whiskey, maybe craft whiskey, and cheers.